Hi, I'm Angela Priven, and I'm a digestive health coach, and I work with people who have irritable bowel syndrome. And I am talking about the GI map today, and it is one of the best tests out there for IBS because it gives you a good look inside your large intestine and tells you what's going on and what is driving symptoms. And I love it because it is more accurate than any of the other tests on the market, and it gives you less false negatives. And it is one of the best tests for parasites and one of the best tests for H. pylori. And those two pathogens are notoriously hard to test for. So, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to compare my GI map, the first one I did, and then the retest, and kind of explain what I found and how valuable it was for me. So, it's not a cheap test, but it is very, very valuable. And hopefully, you get a sense of what kind of information you can gain from taking this test, not once, but twice. So I'm going to dive right in. Oh, by the way, I also do second opinion consults with the GI map because not every practitioner knows how to read it. It's a very specific test, and you have to order it through a practitioner. You can't go directly to the lab, mostly because it is so hard to read. So, because it takes a lot of skill and knowledge to read it, not all practitioners can understand it and read it. So if you don't feel like you got a good interpretation of your test, I do second opinion consultations. So now I'm just going to go through my GI map and what I learned. So the very first section is the foodborne pathogen section. And I actually found that I had two foodborne pathogens in my system. I had eaten something that had two foodborne pathogens in it, probably a month or so before the test. And even though I never noticed symptoms, they were in my system. And one of them was Campylobacter, and that is the one that is associated with SIBO. So some people who have that food poisoning can develop SIBO. Luckily, I did not develop SIBO, but that's perhaps because I did a supplement protocol after this test and maybe it knocked out that bacteria. The second thing I found was that second thing it tests for is H. pylori. I had no H. pylori. I was negative for H. pylori, and including the virulence factors, which are the nasty strains of H. pylori. And then my normal bacteria actually looked very good. And that's probably one of the things on my tests that has kept my immune system so strong and kept me from feeling any symptoms from the other things that I found on the test. The only thing in my bacteria that needed work was my Firmicutes were low, and that is the phyla that produces the anti-inflammatory short chain fatty acid named butyrate. And in order to support that, I just took some more prebiotics. So that was the first action step that I took from this test is just supporting those Firmicutes so they make more anti-inflammatory short chain fatty acids to create a better anti-inflammatory environment in my colon. And then what I was really surprised to find is that when we looked at my pathogenic bacteria, I had some mild overgrowth. So I definitely had some overgrowing species that I didn't want. And I also had one autoimmune trigger species, the Klebsiella, and that one is responsible for, if all the factors are right, can lead to rheumatoid arthritis, which actually runs in my family. So I definitely didn't want that in my system. And the good news is that we can change our bacteria, we can kill the bad guys, and we can feed the good guys, and we can have more of a terrain and a landscape that promotes good digestion, good mood, and good immune function, which is what we want. So I also found out that I had a mild overgrowth of candida as well. So there was quite a bit of dysbiosis, but again, I wasn't feeling any normal symptoms like I wasn't feeling any of the normal symptoms like bloating, gas, or pain probably because of the good function of my good bacteria. Here's another shocker. I found two parasites. So parasites are actually common in the body when you have low stomach acid. I had H. pylori for years previously, and probably they got in there then, and they've been hanging out ever since. So that was another thing that I learned, and I did a parasite cleanse afterwards. Um, I also found that I had a little bit low, my enzymes were a little bit low, my elastase, meaning my pancreas wasn't producing enough enzymes. So I started supplementing with enzymes. My fat digestion was okay. My liver function was great. My secretory IgA, which is a very important marker, which is the marker for immune function, and mine was high, and it was high because it was fighting off the foodborne pathogens. And it was fighting off the foodborne pathogens because it was doing its job. So we really want to see secretory IgA high or in normal range. When it's low, we really need to support it because that's a very important first step to healing the body and fighting any pathogens. My anti-gliadin, which was the marker for gluten, my reaction to gluten was low. It was normal. It was under 100. So I was really relieved about that. And my inflammation, we want to see it under 50. Mine was a 49. So it was okay. And the reason it was kind of creeping up and being so high was because it was fighting off possibly the parasites as well as the foodborne pathogens. And so I didn't get the zonulin because I wanted to save money. And I thought, I can't have leaky gut. I'm a digestive health coach. I don't have leaky gut. And so I didn't get the zonulin. And I do regret it. And I'll tell you why, because I retested the zonulin. And now I would really have loved to know what my zonulin was a year prior. Okay, so what I did after doing this test is I did a parasite cleanse. I did a very strong 2-month parasite cleanse. And it also helped with the candida and the bacterial overgrowth because it had a lot of antimicrobials in it. I ate less carbs because of the candida. I ate a lot of rare burgers and I ate a lot of sushi. So I cut that out because that was probably one of the sources of the foodborne pathogens. I also took my enzymes and I started taking prebiotics to build up my good bacteria. Okay, the next year, a year later, I retook the test, and this is what I found. I found no foodborne pathogens. So the way I've been eating has been working for me. And then I found high H. pylori. And the reason I found high H. pylori is because within that year, I'd been living in an apartment with toxic black mold. And toxic black mold is very stressful in the body. It's an internal stressor. It messes with the biome, with the immune system, and caused my H. pylori to reactivate. So I had H. pylori, and it was a lot of H. pylori, but at least no virulence factors. And then I had high Clostridia, which is a beneficial bacteria. And when it overgrows, it can cause anxiety and kind of OCD feelings, and it's just the inability to relax. And I had been feeling that. So it was kind of vindicating to see that on paper. This time, my butyrate producers, the Firmicutes, were high. So the prebiotics worked. And my bacterial overgrowth was definitely better. And the Klebsiella was gone. So that was also improvement. But the candida was about the same. And I would expect that because with mold and with H. pylori, it is almost impossible to get rid of the candida. So I had to work on those things first. And I did a mold detox, and then I did an H. pylori protocol. The good news was that my secretory IgA was back in range, was back in a healthy range. So I knew that my protocol for the H. pylori would work. That's, again, one of the most important markers on the test is the secretory IgA. When that's low with my clients, we spend a lot of time supporting that before we do any protocol. And that's usually the crucial step that most people or practitioners skip over. And it's very important. So my inflammation was better. It went from 49 to a 1. So that's because the parasites were gone and no foodborne pathogens. So my inflammation was pretty low again. However, the bad news was that because I had lived in mold and because it had such a devastating effect on my body, I no longer had tolerance to gluten, meaning that I was already pretty much gluten-free, but not 100%. So I just had to go 100% and be very careful. And when eating out, take gluten digesting enzymes so that I wasn't going to get contaminated. So I just went from eating a gluten-free diet to eating a very 100% gluten-free diet and being careful about contamination. And then my zonulin came back actually quite high, so I had leaky gut, and that's not a surprise when you have gluten issues because that when you eat gluten, and I had eaten gluten actually the day before the test, so I ate gluten, and that probably insulted my gut even more. So that was the thing that I had to work on last was repairing that leaky gut. And the reason leaky gut is important is because it can cause food sensitivities and it can also lead to autoimmune disease. And I did eventually test my thyroid, and I had just a little bit of antibodies from my thyroid still below the threshold of Hashimoto's disease, but still there. And that's probably the reason why I had those antibodies is because of the leaky gut, which I am in the process or did fix. Hopefully, we'll see. Um, so I also took a food sensitivity test based on the fact that I had leaky gut because leaky gut causes food sensitivities. And then when you keep eating those food sensitivities, it just keeps reinsulting the gut. So one of the ways to heal leaky gut is to avoid your food sensitivities. So I was sensitive to a lot of the stuff that I was eating daily, like cow dairy and eggs and cashews and almonds and avocados. So I cut those out for 6 months. And usually that kind of elimination is a 6-month elimination. And then you can start reintroducing. So the action steps that I took from test two was that I did an H. pylori protocol after my mold detox and also overlapping it during. I took Saccharomyces boulardii to support my immune system, help get rid of H. pylori, and also flush out that Clostridia that was making me so anxious. I became much more careful about gluten. I avoided my food allergies for 6 months. And then I did some repair with glutamine, probiotics, broth, collagen, and tried to lower my stress because that also affects leaky gut. So now I'm getting ready in a month to take my next test. It's a year later. So it'll be my third GI map to make sure that the H. pylori is gone and to check the status of the leaky gut, make sure I have no gluten contamination, and just check my biome and see how everything is. And so the reason why it's so important to take this test once and then retake it to check to make sure everything's gone is that the way it works is that when the gut heals and inflammation lowers, you can sometimes new things pop up. So it's important to always make sure that what you worked on was gone and that nothing new pops up. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope that this was helpful. If you have any questions, you can contact me through my website at DIY Health Blog. DIY stands for do it yourself. So it's DIYHealthblog.com. Thanks.